Hey, look at this mess. Yep. Yep. You're wondering why. I can feel it. Well, for science. Really, I just wanted to show you guys that even when your tank seems to be in utter disarray, I mean, this could be worse, but it's pretty bad, you can bounce back from it pretty easily. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to take this mess of a low-tech planet tank and course correct it so that it's heading back towards looking like a flourishing, well-doing aquarium that is not a pit of algae and despair. So how did we get here? Well, I essentially have done almost nothing but feed the fish on this tank for the last 4 weeks. Typically, I would be doing maintenance every, at least once a week, doing some sort of maintenance, but doing water change every 2 weeks. And I'm usually dosing the aquarium with Excel and just regular Flourish by Seachem, basically every couple of days. So I've ceased all of that and just fed the fish. And this is where we're at. And why are we here? Well, basically what I think is happening, and based on test results, the nitrates and ammonia and nitrite and everything else are in check. Nothing is way out of sorts. But what has happened is I've robbed the plants of their carbon source other than the fish, which aren't putting out much. It's just 10 small fish and 17 gallons of water. And I've also robbed them of their fertilizer. So the plants right now are not going to photosynthesize as effectively, and therefore the algae is starting to outcompete them. The algae is like, I don't care, I can do it no matter what. Just give me a light or give me, anything, and I'll turn into more algae. So they're just doing that, and the plants are probably not too happy about it. So it's time to show you how to course correct this disgusting tank. So essentially what I'm going to do to course correct this is a whole bunch of maintenance, including some physical removal of the algae that's in there. That all happens before I do the water change. That way anything floating in the water I can hopefully suck out. And after that, I just am basically going to restart the schedule of dosing. So I'm going to start providing those nutrients for the plants again, providing that carbon source, and hopefully the next couple of weeks, we'll see this kind of correct itself back to normal. So on the next video for the low-tech tank, we'll be looking at the results of what I'm about to do right now. So let's get started, because this looks like fun. Yay! So the first thing I like to do when it comes to aquarium maintenance, even if it is a disaster like this, is get the glass cleaned up so I'm not staring through dirty glass and I can actually see what I'm doing in the tank without any kind of obstruction. So I'm just going to grab my algae scraper here and just start cleaning up the glass. You'll start seeing debris fly out from behind the plants and stuff that I'm knocking around. Just kind of shows you how much stuff actually gets trapped inside of the leaves in a planet tank. Funny how all I'm doing is scraping down the glass and you can already see how much debris is floating around inside of the tank just from disturbing the plants and the substrate a little bit. So now that the glass is cleaned up and I can see well into the aquarium, it's also foggy now, which kind of, just shows you how bad things can get after a 4-week period of doing literally nothing. I'm going to try and get rid of some of this algae on the plants and the rockwork next. When it comes to plant leaves, I don't like physically removing it if it's going to require any kind of a rubbing action, especially with these sorts of plants, because we're likely to do damage to the leaf, not just remove the algae. With plants like Anubias, you can usually finesse some of the algae off of the leaves without doing any real damage to them, but I don't have that luxury here because I don't have Anubias. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a foxtail brush, like this one. I believe this is an Eheim brush. And I'm going to be trying to get rid of some of this really stringy algae. Whenever I get this thread-like stringy algae, one of the easiest ways I find to get rid of it is just to take a foxtail brush, get it inside, and just start twirling the algae up in the brush. So you can see there's a whole bunch of algae here that's built up, and as soon as I touch it with the foxtail brush, it kind of gets stuck. So what I like to do is just swirl it around like I'm trying to make cotton candy, and I can usually get it to attach to the brush and come off of the plants And you'll see it kind of just wraps around the outside of the brush. It's one of the easiest and fastest ways to get rid of this type of algae. You don't want to do it rapidly. It's just a gentle circular motion to try to pull that algae off of the plants. Anywhere you see it, you can just kind of twirl the brush and you'll usually pick it up. If it's really tight to the rocks, it can be a little bit more difficult to get off, but a little bit of patience and persistence and you can usually get the best of it. Let's see, we got some right here too. I'm gonna just gently work my way through these plants. I can still see some right here. Just in case it's starting in some of these places, I'll just stick the brush in and give a quick little swizzle. Just go rinse out the brush and be right back to tackle some of this fuzzy junk. Fuzzy junk. So now I'm going to try to start off by getting some of that algae off of this pump here. I've turned the pump off, so anything stuck to it should just fall off at this point. The same kind of algae is on the rock, but if it's not going to come off a flat surface like this pump with this brush, I know it's not going to come off the rock, so this is a good place to test to see if it's going to be quite effective. And look at that, it just falls off basically, which is good. Sometimes algae is super, super stubborn. The pump, like I said, is a very smooth surface, so it has a hard time gripping the pump. So getting it off is no biggie. So my pump is essentially clean now. And now I'm going to move to the rock. So algae on rocks tends to be a lot more stubborn because the surface area is a lot rougher, a lot easier for that algae to grip onto. So getting it off can be quite difficult by comparison to the glass or pumps or filters or stuff like that. So you can see I'm making very little progress even with my decent little foxtail brush here. All right, breaking out the big guns. So the tank's getting super cloudy. This is perfectly normal. We've disturbed a lot, whether it's the substrate when I was doing the scraping of the glass and removing algae from in and around the plants and scraping at the rockwork. All of this junk is starting to come out and float around the tank, which is a good thing because we're going to suck it out with the water change, or at least as much of it as we can with a safe size water change. What I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to take my circulation pump here and I'm going to use it to help dislodge anything that could be trapped in the rockwork. Now, this maple leaf rock is pretty porous, which means fish waste and uneaten food and stuff like that, despite me doing my best to make sure it's not in the tank, you know, it's gonna get trapped in the rocks. So taking a moment to use a power head or a pump to blow water at the rocks and kind of encourage that stuff to come flying out. You can see it's getting disturbed even more so now. That's going to help us kind of remove any excess nutrient that's trapped inside of those rocks and building up in the aquarium that could be causing some of these potential algae issues. So now that that's all over the place, it's time to get a water change started. So I'm going to shut down the filter. I'm going to shut down the pump. The heater is actually already off. The heater doesn't need to be on, especially with these white clouds. They can handle cooler water temperatures. So now with all this junk floating around in the tank and everything turned off, I can get my siphon started for the water change. One of the easiest ways to do that, make sure the end of the siphon hose is in the bucket, drop it down into the tank, let the gravel tube fill with water, lift it up so that it starts draining, and then place it back into the tank, and this will start a siphon for you. Hiya! So what I like to do is just start in the areas where you can access the gravel without disturbing the plant roots. You can see there is already a ton of junk coming up like that. I'll also mention that this substrate will naturally have a fair amount of color to it. So I don't want to crush the substrate down too much. I'm not trying to push it in like I would on a regular aquarium because I'm just going to be sucking out what is essentially a lot of sand. But just by touching the surface, I'm going to be able to get a lot of this junk out of the tank that is, comprised mostly of fish waste and of potentially uneaten food and stuff like that. Or also lots and lots of snail carcasses because those assassin snails are doing their job. Man, have they ever murdered a lot of snails. assassinated even. Huh? Assassinate? Assassin snail? Sometimes seeing the delicate nature of gravel vacuuming planted tanks helps people understand how it is you even gravel vac a planted aquarium when there's so many roots and other things in the way that you're trying not to crush. And the long and short of it is you're not really trying to press the gravel vac into the gravel. You're more just kissing the surface. Just a little, look at that. All right. I also like to just try to touch the tops of the plants, especially in these denser areas, just to try and remove any debris that's in, on, or around the plants. As long as you're not crushing the plants when you do it, it's all good. So now we're basically ready to get this tank filled back up. I do want to make a quick note though, the only real maintenance I did on the filter was just cleaning out the intake stem. I don't like doing big maintenance on an aquarium in terms of water changes and wiping down things inside the tank and doing a full maintenance clean on the filter on the same day. A lot of people run into issues because of bacterial drop-off. Basically, you mess with your beneficial bacteria enough that it kind of upsets the balance of the tank. I mean, it's a lot less likely to happen on a planted tank, but I still like to avoid it, so I'll do maintenance on the filter. Next time, we're just gonna get this water here prepped to go in. I like to use RO water for my planted tank, which means I have to use a remineralizer of some sort to get the mineral content where I need it to be. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my bottle of Replenish and add some to the water. So I use almost a full cap full per 5 gallons of water for this tank, almost. Just to get the mineral content where I want it to be. The reason I don't really need to add any more than that is I don't mind if the water's a little bit softer in this system. I know that my rock, if the water gets too soft, is going to buffer it to about neutral anyways. And I also am going to be adding fertilizer and other stuff. So just a wee little bit, just enough. So now that the tank's topped back up, I can turn the filter back on, which I will do right now. Okay, so now that the filter's running again, and we've effectively done all the maintenance we can on the inside of the tank in terms of cleaning, we've done a really nice big water change. The next step in course correcting the complete lack of maintenance on this tank is to start dosing again. So what I've been dosing on this aquarium to keep things rocking and rolling is a little bit of Seachem Flourish, which is a general purpose fertilizer, and Seachem Flourish Excel, which is a essentially a carbon or CO2 substitute. So what I'm going to dose first is my there we go. Dose my carbon source. I'm going to let that circulate for just a couple minutes so I'm not dumping two things in directly one on top of the other. Then I'm sticking this one in. So that's it. We've done a ton of maintenance on this tank. It's really coming around now. When you get a nice close look at it, you can see that the algae on the rocks is quite diminished from all that scrubbing. We don't have any more of that stringy algae hanging around. Hopefully, with keeping up with the dosing schedule and not neglecting the tank, keeping it topped up, doing the next water change in 2 weeks when it's scheduled to be done, we will see a massive improvement on this tank day over day, continuing forward and not going back to where it was at the beginning of this video. I hope this is really useful information to you and you can kind of see that it is possible to bring a tank back from where you might think is a place of no return. You don't always have to, hit that restart button on a tank. Sometimes you can save it just by putting the effort in. And this is a little crash course on how to do that, essentially. If you have any questions, drop those down in the comment section below. I'd love to get back to you. You can also reach out to us on social media like Facebook. We've also got Instagram if you'd like some aquatic eye candy to feast your eyes upon. And, maybe subscribe and see how this turns out in the next couple of weeks. Maybe see how the mega build's doing and maybe the next build after that. And we've got the high tech we need to keep working on. So join me so we can keep on tanking together. Even if it's from a place of disgusting neglect, you still got to keep on tanking. That's the only way to to fix that. Other than like a stick of dynamite, I guess, and just giving up entirely. Oh man, that's not nice. All right, so we've completed the maintenance on the absolutely filthy left to get disgusting. That's a word that I said, made up.